I have to get this out since everybody else seems to love the game but me. I did not enjoy Lies of P. Well, I enjoyed some parts for sure, but overall I wouldn't say it's really worth it. The game was fun at some points, but by the time we got to the back half, the only thing I really enjoyed was Luxasia. I hope that with this video you can understand where I'm coming from and try to help me enjoy the game or change my perspective on things I may have misconceptions about. I'm not here to say Lies of P is a bad game, because I'm extremely unconfident in that take. I need more time with the game to establish that opinion, which I don't plan to do. The one thing I am confident about, however, is how I felt playing the game, and that's what I'm going to be talking about. So let's begin. My history with this game starts when the trailer of Lies of P first came out. I was excited. A new Souls-like that had a twist on the story of Pinocchio, with Bloodborne and Sekiro-esque combat? Sign me up. The demo came out and I was quick to play. Once finishing it, I left with pretty positive thoughts. I liked the Souls gameplay, but really disliked how little distance and how small the window you had to dodge was. It felt like the game was just being hard for the sake of being hard at times, but overall, I really enjoyed it. By the time I got around to actually playing the real game, I had already beaten Dark Souls 1, 2, 3, some parts of Sekiro, but I didn't finish the game and still haven't, and Elden Ring, so I was hungry for another Souls experience, and with the DLC on the horizon, this game could temporarily quench the thirst during the elevator ride up. I got past the tutorial and the game was just as good as I had expected. Great interconnected level design, an interesting line mechanic that I had yet to know what the consequences were, and solid deliberate combat that made me fall in love with these games again. By the time I got to Dark Souls 3 and Elden Ring, it kind of felt like every action you had didn't matter and you could just spam roll and get away with it. That deliberate every action matters concept in DS1 really rung true with me in Lies of P, with how precise the parries were, and I liked that. But once you really learned to parry, man, this game was fun. It made me feel like I was playing Sekiro again. It really opened my eyes to the combat of the game and helped me enjoy it a lot more. However, throughout the game, I had an issue with many of the bosses. Something about them just weren't giving me that challenging aura that the other games gave me. It's not that they were too hard or too easy, but a lot of them had something lacking in them. Let's start with the Parade Master. If you strictly dodge, he becomes annoying, but with parries, he becomes significantly easier and a lot of fun. An overall solid starter boss that I can't really complain about too much, considering that he has to be very mechanically simple. Scrapped Watchman is a good boss with lots of mix-ups and some deceptive attacks where it's better to dodge rather than parry, which I like, but I think is a little too demanding for this point in the game. However, I'm fine with it because I enjoyed him a lot. Overall, he's a B or A tier boss. King's Flame Fuoco is an extremely stagnant and robotic feeling boss, no pun intended, to where I feel like I'm playing a memorization test more than a video game. There's no flow to combat, no cool or interesting combinations to deflect. I hate to say this, but the boss feels like more of a parry simulator. I know this game could technically be summed up to that lazily. Souls bosses in Bloodborne and beyond have swift movements, not just animation-wise, but positioning-wise as well, that simulate the feeling of a real fight. The boss is moving and you're moving. Pairing a guy standing still, swinging his arms up and down as you also stand still, as two people in a fight to the death have a staring contest, isn't really my ideal boss fight. Anywho, the boss isn't really that bad, but not very good either, so I guess I'll give him C. His phase 2 has an annoying camera if you fight the human side, so it's best to just fight the slug side and simplify his moveset. I hated the decay and found it stupid that if I got hit once, I had to restart the entire run, since finding a position to keep repairing my weapon to wait around, then hit the boss 2 times before getting hit by decay again, was not fun to me. It's not necessarily poorly designed since they do have clear telegraphs, but I just didn't enjoy it, so I summoned for the fight. The presentation for the boss is great, however, but the decay I think is too punishing for the early game for a boss to consistently use. C tier. The Black Rabbit Brotherhood has some of the best presentation I've ever seen for any boss ever made. That aesthetic when you enter the Malum district with them as the final boss is amazing. Having that coffin with liar labeled on it knowing that you have lied creates a cryptic and a you fucked up vibe, and now you have to face the consequences. And I loved it. However, once it got into the actual fight, it sucks. The fight with the eldest brother is great stuff for sure, but when the other members jump in, it just feels unnecessary. Hitting the other members doesn't do anything for the main health bar, which I don't think is a good idea. Multi-fighting in a game with parry-based posture one-on-one combat is awful, but luckily there isn't so much overlap, but it still exists to where it creates no-win situations, which I think is stupid. A lot of your time against the boss will be spent running away as you try to learn multiple movesets at once. I summoned for the fight because I hated it, and it wasn't really fun. Sure, the developers did something to offset the pain a little bit, since the elder brother isn't as aggressive as he was initially, but I still don't enjoy the fight. Every video of YouTube on people doing this boss, hitless or just casually, is just washing the other members of the Black Rubber Brotherhood with high damage, spamming throwables, or running away and waiting for a single opening, and none of these options seem fun to me or were fun to me in the fight. The boss is not well designed in my eyes, and I had zero fun fighting it once the other members came in. The eldest brother was fun for the 30 seconds I get before returning to annoying gameplay. The summons did make the fight a bit more fun, but it still wasn't very good with him there. D tier. The stalker fights aren't fun at all. I will admit this is a skill issue since I didn't really take the time to learn all of them 100%, even with YouTube videos as help. I also don't like how the game forces you to fight random stalkers and insignificant bosses as near required if not required ways to progress the game. So when fighting these mini bosses, it feels kinda cheap when they have considerably less time and good design put into them as the main bosses. It kinda just feels like I'm fighting the trash that the devs threw at me. I'm no longer going to talk about stalker fights and the mini bosses since I hate fighting all of them and I don't really find any of them fun. I am aware I haven't really given all of them a completely fair shot by learning their movesets 100%, as I said, but I'm too drained to go back and learn them since not much is really fun about them, which I'll explain later. One thing I absolutely do have to give credit to is the level design throughout the entire game. The consistency for great levels is spotless. Almost every level has a great layout or amazing interconnectivity that I was surprised by. The visual variety of locations is also great and makes sense within the world. Another thing I have to give Lies of P credit for is the innovations it's made, even FromSoft could learn from. A companion with a real personality, Gemini, and Sophia is a good example. Eleanor. I always felt like most female characters in these games just felt like people with no personality, just nice girls. Sophia has a goal, a backstory, interesting dialogue, and even responds to your emotes. Gemini the Cricket has extremely entertaining dialogue while also explaining some of the plot, just in case the player forgets what's going on, but never in a way where it treats you like an idiot. Once those souls go through that fog gate, you're basically never getting them back. Keeping them outside of the fog gate once you die to the boss solves this problem and is a great addition to the Souls formula. There's a number of different things that Lies of P does better than Elden Ring that I'd prefer, like a tangible hub that could have a real interaction with the events of the story, like how the Black Rubber Brotherhood ransacked Hotel Crap, which was a really chilling moment. More unique and better forms of exposition about the narrative of the game would also really help. Pamphlets on the floor that you could read, NPCs starting more conversations with you rather than you going up to them, like Gostock and Stormvale Castle, the unique weapon system, etc., makes me think that Neo sometimes is ahead of FromSoft when it comes to storytelling. There's so much positive about the base mechanics of the game, and I can't help but praise it. One big weakness of Lies of P to me is the overuse of status effects. It feels like every level after the Opera House has to have a new status effect, or use an extremely annoying one. I'm sorry, NeoWiz. A good level can't exist without spamming status effects on every single enemy. The main point I want to make with this is Decay, something I think is extremely overused. Decay is a status effect used far too often in the game, and I did not enjoy it at all. Decay hurts your HP and your weapon durability, but I really want to focus on the weapon durability part, since that's the part that made me tired of the game quick. When you are hit with Decay, it is extremely hard to repair your weapon effectively in the middle of a fight, regardless if it's an area or a boss. The Decay lasts around 30 seconds, and if you attack or block, then your weapon's durability will go down, and if your weapon breaks, it's over for you. You can't repair or get it back. Well, I mean, unless you die, but by that point, the attempt's over. You will attack doing piss poor damage with a broken weapon, so it's safe to say you should avoid this as much as possible. So when you do have Decay, your best bet should just be to grind your weapon and repair it to max, or to cure the Decay. First, you have the option to repair your weapon, but it still takes a while, and in the heat of combat, it's going to be hard to perform with the small openings you get and how fast Decay destroys your weapon's durability. If you don't perfectly parry these Decay attacks or dodge the severely delayed attacks in the game with the poor amount of iframes you get per dodge, you will often get Decay, a learning process I didn't really find enjoyable as you had to grind your weapon for being hit once. It made me feel like the game was forcing me to play flawlessly with already hard to master base mechanics. Getting hit once in the learning process early game to get Decay for me basically not being able to hit the boss since that would drain my weapon durability, and having any chance to block at all would shred my weapon durability, which is far too much of a risk that I wasn't willing to take. So basically, I just stand there, dodging and running for 30 seconds, and every attack opening is me pathetically and just barely healing back 10% of the Decay. And I just keep doing that, and then once we get back to fighting after 30 seconds, I get Decay again. It's just not fun for me. It ruins the flow of every single fight, and is used far too often in my opinion. Your weapon also breaking is something I really dislike. Regardless of the decay, if I didn't play near perfectly, I had to repair my weapon's durability and go back to the boring waiting session that wasn't fun. The second option is to cure the decay with an item called the Purification Amplo, which I found nearly none on my first playthrough. I didn't know you could buy them from a vendor until now. And while this is partly my fault, I still really dislike how much it is used. I find it odd that nobody complains about the weapon durability issue here, especially with how prevalent decay is throughout the entire game, when Dark Souls 2 has almost the same thing with bosses that will basically break your weapon like Sinner, Lud, and Zolin. But DS2 is far more criticized for it. It reminds me why Elden Ring removed the weapon durability system, since it was unnecessary to keep repairing your weapon and didn't add to gameplay positively, make the game more fun, or strategic. Who finds it fun to go back to Andre to spend your souls to repair your weapon? There's no tactical or strategized gameplay here, just unnecessary wastes of souls that make the game more inconvenient mid-boss fight. Lies of P has this problem but on roids, since decay is a part of so many levels and it's a part of like 70% of the game, and if you get hit once or twice, you get decay. It's simply not fun and is honestly bad design in my opinion to abuse such a fragile part of the game's combat system and have it be so prevalent in nearly every level, and in some cases, bosses in the game. Now, let me explain my issues with the back half. The first half of the game was mostly enjoyable, with great level layout, decent design and enemies, and solid bosses. They weren't amazing or anything, but serviceable and enjoyable, and most top tier bosses in the Souls games anyway came in the back half. So, that's what I was expecting. Great bosses and solid levels. The arcade is packed with decay around every corner, and I've already explained why I hate decay. I never enjoy it and don't think it adds positively to any level. While the layout of this area is some of the best in any Souls game I've ever played, I didn't enjoy the enemies. I also didn't enjoy how you have to fight a guy in a tiny arena with a bunch of garbage in the surrounding area that obscures the animations of the boss, and messes up your camera while you have status effects on you, and that he's required. The boss there is solid, but I was so tired of the decay that I just cheesed him, thinking he would be the same thing. I still don't regret my decision to use summons since I was so drained by the time I got to him, but it still is a little bit of a shame that I skipped the opportunity to have more fun with the boss. The Barren Swamp is filled with corruption and tons of reskins of puppets of the future, which feels more annoying than fun or well designed, and the Mad Clown puppet reskin is something I also wasn't excited for, with the boss at the end that has tons of decay that could one-shot me at 70% HP. For not pairing one attack with ridiculously small timings. This is a skill issue, admittedly, but I think that's too punishing since not even the final boss does that to my knowledge. He's still a decent boss, and he has a good idea of a reskin, but his damage was so high in a game with such tight requirements to avoid damage that I just got frustrated in Summon, since I really didn't enjoy the fight. Then there's Krat Central Station, which is really cool when you go back to the starting area, but instead filled with decay and an annoying terrible boss who is decay personified. The worst part of this whole area is the abandoned apartment and collapsed street area. I did not enjoy the Deathblight crystals that activate upon proximity and have considerable amounts of HP while you have to multi-fight an enemy while platforming. I really did not enjoy that. I did not like how many Deathblight crystals there were, and this level made me want to tear my hair out. Even worse, I don't see why a lazy reskin of the first boss with the status affected summons is a good idea. A reskin of a boss with status effects usually isn't a better idea, and adding summons into any fight is never a good idea. This boss is garbage, and I did not enjoy the area as much as I did not enjoy the boss. Right after this, you can fight the worst boss of all time. I'm fairly confident this is the worst boss I have ever fought in any video game ever. You can skip to this timestamp if you don't want to hear me rant about them, but in short, they're fucking awful. Now, you have a reskin boss here with the exact same moveset as the last Black Rabbit Brotherhood fight, but instead with status effects, so if you get hit, which is very likely with their hard to read animations during the learning process at times, especially from the little one, then you'll get decay, overheat, and electric. I do not enjoy the tiny arena that forces you to be grabbed by the red guy's prosthetic. You cannot predict this coming as I don't think there's a sound cue, no pattern for him doing this, no timer. You can't even see him do it since the arena is so small. Getting all three on the screen at once usually means your back is to the wall, which also means it's probably over for you. The aggro of enemies sometimes switches, but the other two can throw projectiles with no clear signal in the middle of the fight like Demon Princess or Sister Frida. So you just get hit stunned to death unless you're looking at your entire screen at the same time. In a game with much tighter parries and dodges than Sekiro. I want to reiterate that. A gank boss with tighter parries than Sekiro. The run back is also awful, being a minute long with many enemies that just isn't fun. Especially since nearly no other boss in the game has a long run back like this. I don't understand why the worst boss has to also have the worst run back. I do not enjoy the little girl since she has decay, with the most rapid hits being extremely hard to read, and if you block or get hit, you get decay. I did not enjoy this. I hated her in a 1v1 and I only want to uninstall fighting her. I hate the red guy for the same reasons, except he has overheat, which is also ass. I did not enjoy his moveset. I'd be willing to learn him if it wasn't for me being triple teamed by projectiles, so I can't even focus or fight him, so my only option is to run away with my terrible movement. And then he pulls me back mid-fight and then I just die. Oh yeah, and then there's the barrel guy. I actually like the barrel guy. His status effect isn't obnoxious, but my problem with him is that when he's in a fucking telephone booth with these two idiots and now I have to try to enjoy a decent fight with annoying unavoidable damage I can't even see, I start to hate him as well. Oh yeah, and did I mention there's a phase 2? I don't want to talk about this anymore. This is the point where I lost hope for Lies of P. Why play a game when the levels are unenjoyable, the bosses are unenjoyable, lazy and poorly designed, and overly punishing for no reason? The runbacks are awful and there's no fun to be had for the last 20 hours. Why do I get on this game if all I do is suffer? I cannot explain it any better than just to fight it. I simply just do not enjoy battling 3 reskinned, not originally fun, lazy enemies with status effects, littered in a tiny arena where you're forced to die with a shitty run back to waste your time. I would have uninstalled at this point because the boss was so bad, if it wasn't for all the rumors about Lexasia and Nameless Puppet being so good. Once we get to the final area, the Alchemist Island, I didn't care for anything. I ran past everything to beat a shitty boss and got to Lexasia, the one thing I was looking forward to. If she wasn't going to be as good as everyone said she was, I was willing to uninstall. I can confidently say, though, she's a good fight. Her phase 1 possesses a lot of cool attacks, some being a little overwhelming, but still learnable. Her combos are smooth and her mix-ups are varied. She's a fun A-tier boss. For a phase 1, I think she's near perfect. I also really like the shield on her back gimmick to where you have to face her like a man, face to face. But the size of it is a little bit oversized if I'm being honest, to where getting correct punishes sometimes gives you a wall bang, which is kinda cheap. Her phase 1 armor, however, is ugly as hell and her voice is really rough, but that all changes when we get to her phase 2. Now she becomes a lightning baddie. I love her lightning reversal parry mechanic, and her moves stop becoming so static. Her animations and moves are fluid, and it feels like I'm fighting a female version of Killua Godspeed. Almost every attack from her is really cool. I love the blue lightning on her. I love her fast after image teleporting moves. I love how she runs around you and tries to get a better position on you and tries to angle up. It's a really fun fight. She looks really cool, and Neo has killed it with her character design and aesthetic. She's cool as shit and has constant backflips into lightning deflects, which are tons of fun. I really wish I could give this boss S tier to stand with the other Dex Queens in the main Souls games, but I do have a few problems. 1. Her arena is awfully small for the movement of the boss. Sometimes she can go up while you're fighting her and you can't see the animation, so it feels pretty cheap. I also kind of dislike how the majority of your damage to her will be reflecting lightning rather than interacting with some of her amazing combos. I wish the fight was more about her crazy lightning combinations and less of her lightning reflex spam and one-note attacks where you just make her look like a dumbass. It might be just me having too high expectations because I love the aesthetic of the fight, but I'm still pretty satisfied with what we got here. This fight often has status effects, but the effect is so minimal that I don't even mind it. Also, at least in this fight, you can repair your weapon at the beginning of phase 2, to where you should be okay and have enough time to deflect all the lightning, which I think all bosses should have. Overall, she's A tier. I want her to be S, and her phase 1 is near flawless, but I really dislike how short and reliant phase 2 is on just one mechanic. We run up to the penultimate boss of the game because I don't really care anymore for the area, and he seems oddly easy. If you just stick to the side where he doesn't have an arm, you can greatly simplify him, and it's not really fun slapping a human meatball around. His phase 2 has a bunch of overlapping attacks, and while that does sound like a bad thing on paper, I like the idea of the player having to improvise on the spot to use multiple forms of damage evasion to get around the boss, and just to be creative with your openings. I really like the idea of that. However, the second I saw he had Deathblight in his kit, it was over for him. I did not care about how fun this was, or if he was the greatest boss ever made, or if the final boss was extremely entertaining, or if he had an amazing spectacle. No, none of that mattered. If you have status effects, especially one that instantly kills you, as the basically final boss, in a lane of homing projectiles, that is enough for me to just use summons and to just cheese the boss by spamming weapon arts. I am tired of all the forced status effects. I am tired of the terrible areas that aren't fun. I'm tired of the stalker fights. I'm tired of the bosses, and I'm just here to rest. Yes, I was that annoyed. It didn't matter what he had to offer. One move with one status effect was enough for me to deem him basically skippable. He was not worth learning. Nameless puppet time, and he kicks my ass. I tried to learn him, but I didn't enjoy how he can heal, which discouraged me from wanting to fight him. I didn't want to cheese the final boss in the game, who's supposed to be amazing, and I could see the good design shining through my pessimism, but I just couldn't. I felt drained, like I had wasted 60 plus hours of time on something I didn't enjoy, and I didn't want to play the game anymore. I wondered, was this how I felt when a true challenge occurred? I remember something like this throughout my harshest experiences throughout the Souls games. Like I wanted to give up, but I persisted anyway for a greater experience. Maybe I was just feeling down that day, or felt drained of the game at that point. So I waited a month or so, beat the Elden Ring DLC, which I struggled with a lot, but I still enjoyed the design of the bosses. I came back to Lies of P, and I still got that same feeling. I don't know, I just couldn't do it. 2 hours in, and I felt equally as drained as I did 1 month prior, despite spending so much time away from the main game. It wasn't just that the boss was too hard, but more that I wasn't willing to learn it. It was that the entire game was so unenjoyable to me for the entire back half that I had no willingness to even learn the boss mentally, since beating him is probably not going to be worth it. I mean, why beat the final boss and think he's going to be worth it, when nearly everything else in the last 30 hours wasn't worth it, regardless if it was well designed. Will I ever beat Nameless Puppet? I don't know. It's not worth playing the game anymore, even if the boss is well designed for me. I'm so tired of the game I don't ever want to play it again. I'm sorry if this comes off as harsh, but this is genuinely how I feel. I will not be playing the DLC, regardless of how good it is, and I don't intend to be replaying the game to enforce or take back my opinions. There are enjoyable parts about the game, and some parts that could be well made, but I'm just wrong about them. But if I replay the game, really, what am I here for? A strong introduction that sets my expectations up, a solid area and a mediocre boss, an area with a great layout but has annoying status effects and a mediocre boss, a cool level with a poorly designed gank fight, an area with a good layout but has annoying status effects and a great boss this time, an area with an amazing layout but has dogshit enemies and annoying status effects with a good boss, a bad area with a bad layout that has annoying status effects with a decent boss that has annoying status effects, a terrible level with annoying status effects, and a terrible boss that has annoying status effects, an annoying level with the worst boss ever made with 3 different status effects, and the rest doesn't matter. This game so far isn't worth playing. Even if they dropped the greatest levels and bosses ever made in the DLC, I still had to suffer through everything else in the game to get here. I hope you can understand where I'm coming from, and see maybe why I wouldn't enjoy the game. If you've got any tips for Nameless Puppet, or just want to share your thoughts, criticisms, or try to help me enjoy the game again, please leave them down below. Thanks for watching, and you can join my Discord server below if you have any questions about the game you want to ask me. More content is on the way.